Microjig, maker of the gripper. Work safer, work smarter.
This walnut board that I'm using for the box started out as a 5/4 board, and now that I have one face nice and flat, I can reference it up against the resaw fence on my table saw, and I'll resaw it right down the middle. In box making, a popular method to get consistent grain match all the way around the perimeter of your box is to take a board and resaw it right down the middle. In order for this to work, when you go to cut the short sides of your box, you want to get one of the short sides from one of the halves of the resaw, and then you want to get the other side from the opposite end of the board or the opposite end of the book match to get the other side. Before I go any further, I'm going to lightly face joint each resawn face, and then I'll plane these boards to thickness. I tilted my table saw blade to 45 degrees, and now I can cut all of the miters on all the pieces. For the panel for the box, I have a piece of maple that has a lot of cool figure. It kind of looks like spalting, but I'm not 100% sure exactly what it is. I just know it looks cool. So I'm going to flatten one face at the joiner and get one edge nice and square to that face. And then at the bandsaw, I'm going to resaw this open right down the middle to create a book match, and I'll see how it looks on the inside. Well, that book match came out looking pretty cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is get a nice straight and square edge on both of these mating surfaces, and then I'll just glue it together. Using a stacked dado set at the table saw, I'm going to make a 1/4 inch groove in both the top and bottom of each component for the top and bottom panel of the box. I temporarily clamped the sides of the box together so that I could mark for the length and width of the top panel and also the panel that's going to go in the bottom. I'm using what's called a story stick, and it's just a piece of scrap wood that I butt against the side of one of the sides of the box. And then I mark for the length on one of the sides of the stick, and then I add an extra distance for the amount of material that's going to go into the groove on both sides. And then I repeat the process for the width using another side of the stick. Then I'll just take this over to the table saw, and I can set my rip fence directly from this story stick. Because the top panel is a book match and I want to keep the line of symmetry exactly in the center of the panel, I'm going to remove the same amount of material from both sides. So I know that the total amount of extra material is 2 inches, so I'm going to remove 1 inch off of one side, and then when I go to rip the second side of the panel, I'm going to set the rip fence with my story stick. At the router table, I'm going to use the back side of a panel raising bit so that I can form a recess all the way around the perimeter of the panel so that I can fit the edges in the 1/4 inch groove that we created in the sides of the box. And when I make this recess, I'm going to make the recess on the back side of the panel. At the table saw with a stacked dado set and my homemade spline jig, I'm going to put 3 splines in each corner of the box. And I'm going to make sure that when I put the spline towards the top of the box, that it's going to end up being in the center of what will later become the top section of the box after it's cut loose from the bottom part of the box. That'll make more sense later. Now I need to cut the box open, and I'm going to make the cut in between the 2 top splines. I'm going to do the 2 long sides first, and then I'll do the short sides. Before I make the cuts for the short sides, completely removing the top of the box, I loosely placed in 4 wedges into the kerf cut in the long sides. I have 2 wedges towards the top of the kerf and 2 wedges towards the bottom. And then I secured the kerf with pieces of blue tape on both sides. With 2 pieces of 220 grit sandpaper adhered to my granite surface plate, I'm going to get rid of any saw marks that were left on the bottom of the box and also on the top. For the liner inside the box, I'm going to use a piece of scrap curly maple that I've been hanging on to for years that was left over from an older project. After a couple coats of a mixture of mineral spirits and polyurethane, the box is finished, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I like how the grain wraps all the way around the box. That came out looking really neat. And what I also like about this box is that it's Because the top was cut from the same piece of wood as the bottom, it's actually kind of hard to tell where the lid starts. So I think that's kind of cool. If you liked this video, I hope you would consider joining my Patreon community and supporting what I do by clicking on the link over here. And I'd also like to especially thank those of you that are already providing some support through Patreon. You guys are helping to keep the lights on and the table saw running. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.